What if I told you there was a way to save time and find deals to help you save money? Well, Instacart delivers. Right now, they are offering free delivery on your first order over $35. They connect you with personal shoppers in your area to shop and deliver groceries from your favorite stores. Follow the link in the show notes and let Instacart know the ExEm podcast sent you. It really helps support our show.
Welcome to the ExEm podcast. Here is your host, mental health therapist, Matthew Kanabe.
I am very hard on myself, dealt with severe anxiety.
And it made me feel like a monster. I didn't have the energy to care.
There was just nothing more but to face what I had been running from.
I'm already an anxiety-filled mess.
It's just love. Like, it just goes back to love.
Well, I get very excited to record these conversations with people from diverse perspectives and all various walks of life, and I got to tell you, today is no exception. I have been particularly interested in what our guest today has been up to and the things he shares with people around the world. So he came into my radar just about sometime last year at a very cool event that he spoke at, which you'll hear about in today's podcast. He's a CEO, he's an author, public speaker, but more importantly, he's a husband, he's a dad to two girls just like me, and a person who spreads the gospel about Jesus. Welcome to the show, Dan Owolabi.
Yeah, glad to be here. This is exciting. A couple things about me. I'm a husband. My wife and I married about 17 years ago, going on 18 years. We got two beautiful little girls, Eden and Aniston. One's 12, one's 9. One of the things that I think really undergirds who we are as a family is the fact that we all are athletes. We all are academics. We all love reading. We love running. We love working out. So that's really fun. In my spare time, what I do is I'm the CEO of Branches. We're a global consulting firm that helps Christians build companies that change their communities. And so it's really fun to work with Christian leaders who are thinking about both their, present influence, but then also the internal impact they can make on communities and on cultures. And so we spent a lot of time thinking about that. I'm an author, wrote Authentic Leadership a couple years ago. That did really well, spoken on some stages. And last 6 months, finishing a doctorate right now, which I'm really thrilled by. Oh, so glad to be almost done with that.
Yeah, that's a lot of work, man.
It's fun to be almost done. Yeah,
I bet. And you're from the Ohio area. Is that correct?
You got it. Yep. Northeast Ohio. I've been here for probably 35 years.
Yeah. Well, Dan, you and I were talking a little bit before we hit record, and my interest was piqued last year at a leadership summit that was done at Malone University, and Dr. Henry Cloud was speaking. And you were also on that, and I hadn't heard of you yet. I wasn't aware of your stuff, and then you spoke, and I was like, oh my gosh, I got to follow this guy on LinkedIn. I got to find out what he's doing. I want to understand what's going on, with his nonprofit Branches and all that stuff. So, talk to me a little bit about your journey into this space and what brought you into talking about leadership, authoring some of these books. Like, what's been your journey into that?
Yeah, great question. So I think just to start, man, I really appreciate your prayer before we got on, where you talked about the value of stories building the kingdom. And I think there's a level of expertise that people bring to the table. But I think when you get to understand people's experience, like who they are, where they came from, what they've been through, man, it gives some texture to the relationships God's creating. So I appreciate you praying that. That's good. Yeah. With that framework, so how I got into leadership, my experience, I've always found myself, for some reason or another, at the intersection of faith and leadership. I love thinking about how other people influence other people, even in the Bible, American history, world history, and then always really passionate personally about God's kingdom, and then really passionate to see other people take it seriously. I love this idea that, especially with missionaries around the world, where people will give up the temporary to gain the eternal. And they do that with clear eyes. I love that concept. So I always found myself at the intersection of faith and leadership. That led me to a couple of different things. I was a teacher for a while. I was a pastor for about 10 years. When I left pastoring to start Branches Worldwide with a friend, I felt called to write a book on authenticity. And the reason why was because, as my experience as a pastor, again, the intersection of faith and leadership, I would sit down and I would talk to a lot of a lot of executives, owners, CEOs, entrepreneurs who spent all day long feeling like they had to be 10 feet tall and bulletproof. But then you talk to them behind the scenes, you've done this, obviously, one-on-one behind the scenes, and they'll tell you things. They'll tell things to their pastor that they wouldn't tell anybody. They won't even tell their spouse. And what you hear, it was like 9 times out of 10, this crippling insecurity, like this feeling that they had something to prove, they had something to hide, they had something to lose. And for me, like that was just so far from the ideal experience of a Christian leader, right? You should feel like you have nothing to hide, you have nothing to prove, you have nothing to lose. So I started looking into what the antidote for insecurity was. And what I found was authenticity. And it just turns out that authenticity was also like a buzzword at the time. It was like, I think the 2023 Merriam-Webster word of the year, something like that. Yeah. So the book did really well, which was really exciting to watch God kind of help a lot of people with it, but it was fun.
That's good. Let's talk about Branches a little bit, and you're the CEO there. Let's talk about what the organization is, and then you guys have a really big event that's coming. If you wouldn't mind sharing about what that looks like.
Yeah. So, Branches, I might have said earlier, Branches is a global consulting firm that helps Christians build companies that are designed to change their communities or transform their communities. And so we've got a for-profit side, we've got a nonprofit side. The for-profit side works with companies here in the States, a few around the world, really helping them from the ground up integrate their faith and their business together, in their P&Ls, in their operations, in their supply chain, really think about faith deeply. We call those redemptive enterprises. The whole way, from top to bottom, they're trying to honor God. Not just having Bible studies and break rooms, but the whole thing, And then the nonprofit side, we work with entrepreneurs in 30 countries around the world. And that's this like long-term vision where we work with 30 leaders from 30 countries for 30 years. And everything that we offer for a fee on the for-profit side, we offer for free for our nonprofit clients. Wow. And so that's how we operate.
That's great.
The summit coming up in November, I'm excited by that. That'll be about 500 people, kind of gathering in Holmes County, which coincidentally is the area in the globe that has the highest concentration of Christian entrepreneurs anywhere on the planet.
Really?
And so, it's crazy. And so 500 people gathering there. The theme is cohesion, and it's all about the integration of your organization and your faith, just a seamless integration between the two. So it'll be a lot of fun.
That's good. Can we talk a little bit about the idea of in the for-profit world as a Christian leader in a non-Christian environment? Talk to me a little bit about that experience. And, I work in a nonprofit ministry, and so we're able to lead with our faith. We're pretty open with that. I mean, when people come to Emerge for counseling or coaching or whatever, they know the environment they're walking into. What are some of your conversations with those who are not in environments quite like that and working maybe in different types of places?
We'll be right back.
LPC, LPCC, IMFT, LISW, PhD. If you don't know what any of those are, go ahead and hit the 30-second fast forward button and enjoy the podcast. But if you know someone or happen to have those credentials, then Emerge might be your next career path. If you're seeking to join a team that provides authentic Christian counseling and utilizes advanced modalities, then apply today at emerge.org/careers and join us in the battle to help people find freedom and rest.
Yeah, that's a great question. Especially in the United States, there's been some apprehension for maybe about 20 or 30 years about, being open about your faith in public settings. Yeah. For some people, it's a real trigger, kind of revolt. It takes them to a place of revulsion. And what we found for people who are strong Christians, they've figured out how to be genuine with their faith without being pushy per se.
Yeah.
Usually when you meet with someone or you're doing business with someone, there's a common focal point. Hey, we're here to talk about Windows, we're here to talk about making widgets, whatever. Mm-hmm. But good business is about relationships, getting to know the person. Hey, why are you in this? Why aren't you doing something else? And over time, what we find when you have genuine relationships with people in business, you start talking about the personal values behind the work that you do. Everybody has values. And so as a Christian, over time with strong relationships, you have a chance to talk about that. But it takes time and it takes relationship, honestly, just like anything else.
Mm-hmm. So there was a post that you had put on LinkedIn, and it really made an impact on me. And you and I talked a little bit about it before we hit record. And I think leadership is by nature is a difficult thing, and we certainly saw this. I work with a lot of pastors, so through the pandemic, it was like leading during a difficult time. Trying to make the best decisions you can. By nature, you were going to make somebody angry. Like it was like there was no 100% win on any decision that anybody was making. And now that's been a true statement, I think, throughout history, but we just saw it magnified on a global level during that time. And now I think post pandemic and post 2020, and we have a lot of these conversations. I've had many of these conversations about how do we lead well? How do we lead? And you did a post that it really made an impact on me. I brought it back to Emerge. We utilized it as a leadership team, kind of went through the slides that you had posted, but essentially the title of that was why Christian leaders make people angry. And as Christian leaders, you don't want to do that. But by nature, if you're leading well, it's a byproduct of doing that. Would you mind sharing a little bit about your thought process behind that?
Yeah, the part that I think was really the most important part for me was this realization that if you're going to lead and you're going to lead in a particular direction, there are going to be people who question you. They don't understand why you're moving that direction. When you're moving in a particular direction, there's a direction that you're not moving in, and they might want you to move in that direction, and so they're going to be upset with you for that. And there's this recognition that, like, look, in order to lead anything, you have to be okay making a few people upset. You have to be fine with that, not because you want to do it on purpose or you want to make them angry, but you recognize there's a broader good, there's a bigger good beyond your ego, beyond wanting to be liked, beyond wanting to, make everybody feel good. You recognize there's a bigger win there, and you're pursuing that win for the sake of other people. The big part of the post was about humility, and maybe a little bit of a twist on humility in that, you can take the heat and you can take the anger from other people because your ego's not involved, because you genuinely are working for something bigger than yourself. Yeah. But you get personally hurt by a lot of the frustrations of people around you when your ego is like directly tied to their opinion of you, right. Then it starts to hurt a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's inevitable. I've shared my little bit of my story, or a lot of my story on the podcast. And so our listeners know most of my early life I spent in the music industry. And it was the late 90s, early 2000s. And I was I was fortunate to be in one of the biggest Christian bands in the world at the time. And but I was in a band called Sonic Flood.
Oh my goodness. Oh, I love those guys.
Yeah. So I was a touring guitar player in Sonic Flood for years. And then I spent the remainder of my time in the secular music industry. And my point of that is I was having this conversation with our president the other day because we were talking about similar topics. And when the band was hitting, it was kind of like the beginning stages of the internet. The mid 90s is like when all of that. And so you would have these chat rooms like AOL chat and stuff. That was kind of like the place that people would utilize. Now they use Facebook and Instagram, but that was kind of the thing. And I remember one of my bandmates came out. We were living in an apartment downtown Nashville, and it was like 2 a.m. He's like, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, I can't stop reading these posts. These people are ripping me apart. They don't like my haircut. And it was like, I was 19 years old and just trying to figure out life. And the thing was, I learned that when you're doing something good and when you're doing and heading in a great direction, people will have issue with that. No matter what it is, they're going to find issue. And I found that now that I'm much older and later in life, in different leadership positions that myself and my team have been in. Anytime you're doing something that's steering the ship in a direction, you're going to have that Yeah, you're going to have that. And the thing is, what I loved about what you just said is the humility of going, you know what, it's really not about me. This is about really what God's doing. And I'm just helping our team get to the place where he wants to go. Does that make sense?
It makes a lot of sense. I'm really glad that you said that. That personal experience at 19 is so valuable.
It is, man.
They don't even know you, and they just don't like your haircut.
Why are they making that? Has nothing to do with the song.
Right.
Well, and then
you're reading it. You just can't get enough of it.
And then you put out a record and, it gets success. You put out the next record. If it sounds too much like the first record, they blast you. If it doesn't sound anything like the first record, they blast you. So it's a never win situation.
So true. Isn't that crazy? That's crazy. But yeah, I mean, being faithful to what God's called you to really is that ultimate antidote to that. You see David and, Paul and people in the Bible who have faced just tremendous criticism, and their North Star is really what kind of helps them weather some of those storms.
Yeah.
I mentioned earlier finishing a doctorate in leadership. One of the things that I've learned, which I know you already know, but I'm learning now too, is that, there's a spiritual reason why people do things like that, why they, obviously attack you. But then there's also this like practical reason. The best illustration that I had heard was about somebody playing soccer, right? Now, if you're familiar with soccer, there's one person who has the ball, they're charging up the field, getting ready to score. At any given point when they're sort of about to score, they look behind them. There's like a ton of people who are all chasing them down, like doing everything they possibly can to stop them from succeeding.
Yeah.
And, if the forward, if they're about to score, if they would think, gosh, these guys really hate me as a person, well, then, you'd sort of miss the whole point of the game. It's not about you personally. It's the fact that you have the ball right now,
Mm-hmm.
And I think leaders get a lot of heat and they think, oh, they must not like me as a person. No, it's not you. It's the fact that you are sitting in a position as a leader to make significant changes, and they may or may not like the changes. And so they put that on you. And so just recognizing this is not about me personally. It's about the position I'm in. It's about the thing I'm trying to do. That helps a ton.
And I think that's part of the responsibility of being called to be a leader is being able to carry that. Recently, I had a conversation with a teammate, and they were asking, well, why didn't you tell us this part of what's going on? And it was simply because I was like, because I'll carry that weight. You don't have to carry that. That the reason I'm in this position, the reason our leadership team is assembled, the way that it is because we're the ones that are going to carry that so that you don't have to, and that's a difficult position to be in, but it's also, I think, a reality of going when you accept a place that you're leading, that's kind of goes with the expectations, right?
That's exactly right. Yeah. Yeah. And I think what you'll find is that healthy leaders, recognize the room they're walking into. They recognize the situation they're walking into, and they own it. They're like, okay, I'm now the leader. So these are the responsibilities that come with it. They just own that fully. Yeah. And they sort of care for their people by sort of shouldering a lot of the burdens that you're talking about. I think the most unhealthy leaders, and I think the pandemic, like you described earlier, really exposed a lot of unhealth, in leadership. But a lot of unhealthy leaders get into leadership for the wrong reasons. They want to be liked, they want status, they're selfish. There's a lot of different poor reasons to kind of take the mantle of whatever title you have. And I think as soon as, the proverbial crap hits the fan, all of a sudden, the real reason why you're leading sort of gets exposed, and you realize, oh, wow, this is really hard because, you're not the kind of person who could, take genuine responsibility for caring for the people around you in a way that says, I'm willing to take a lot of heat here because I know it's good for people in the long run.
So in preparation with your book and the concept of authenticity, and I think authenticity comes with transparency. How do you help or coach those in those positions to be able to be transparent, be authentic, but know there's times where this is information that's appropriate for this time. This is times where, we need to hold that a little bit closer. Am I making sense in that analogy?
Oh man, you're making a ton of sense. Yeah. Wow. I feel like you read my book. That's an excellent distinction.
I will read it. I promise I will.
Yeah. So one of the points I make almost right away in the book is that there is a distinction between transparency and authenticity. You'll find the most inexperienced leaders will confuse the two.
Yeah.
And they think, well, I'm trying to be authentic, so I have to tell everybody what's on my mind. I have to be completely transparent, no secrets. You can ask me anything. Open door policy.
Yeah.
And man, that is a recipe for disaster. Like that is a misunderstanding of authenticity. The example I give in the book is about airline pilots. Right? Take for example, if you're flying a 747, there has to be a first time that you're flying. Right? There has to be a first time you're up in the air with everybody. Right. And so let's say you're flying for the very first time and you hit this tremendous storm that you've never encountered again because it's your first time. And so in order to be transparent, a good leader of the plane, you get on the mic and you're like, hey, everybody, we're about to go into some turbulence. And I've never flown into a storm before. And so we're all just going to do the very best we can and hold on to your butts. And hopefully we'll get through this okay. Let's pray. But I believe authenticity and transparency is the name of the game. Well, I mean, people would just flip out.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of stories of people honestly flipping out when, airline pilots are just too transparent. The answer to that is you want to reveal the information to people that is true, but also helpful. Mm-hmm. Like that second piece is really important. Like you want to be honest and also helpful at the same time. So you can be honest but not helpful. Well, then don't say it. That's not a sin to not say something that's not helpful to people. So that's the way we make the distinction between the two.
Do you feel like that is something that's learned in discernment, or how do you gauge when transparency is appropriate versus, and that's a great example. It's like we don't need mayhem on an airplane when we're trying to keep calm and whatever. But I'm thinking about a pastor leading a church in a situation. Mm-hmm. Like, how do we define when is it appropriate? I'll rewind a little bit. Like, one of the things as mental health therapists, we have to think about when it is appropriate to self-disclose and when not to. It's a very dangerous thing to over self-disclose with a client because it's not about you. Right. It's about the work you're doing with that person. But then there's other times where it's like, you know what, this person needs to realize I'm a human being and I relate to them and I can connect with them. So that's a learned skill that I think some people develop, and it's a muscle. And I think sometimes, so I guess my question in leadership, how do we develop that?
Yeah. Well, you said it right. It is a learned skill. I think it's an art. This is the art of leadership, right? This isn't about, hey, there's a formula, or a framework that you can use. There are some guideposts that you can look to and say, okay, I'm on the right track. One helpful principle or one helpful rule of thumb, and you mentioned this, alluded to it a little bit just a second ago, is that whenever you're disclosing literally anything, it's never about you, ever. I mean, you can be the topic of discussion, but you're not doing it in order to feel better about yourself or to get something off your chest ever. As a leader, you need a counselor, you need people in your corner, you need someone that you can talk to, where you can just be about you and not have to be about sort of the influence you're creating or the culture you're developing. But when you're in front of people that you're leading, it is never about you. Everything you say is about, how can I help this person get to where God's calling them to go? And if it means disclosing some things about myself so that they see me as a person, so we develop genuine trust, then I'll do that. If it means holding back and not saying things, I'll do that too. Yeah. Always honest, but not always transparent.
Mm-hmm. I think, when we look at scripture, throughout all of it, God talks about matters of the heart time and time and time again. And I think there's so much to that. And I think to what you're saying is, it's like really looking and going, is this about my ego? Am I sharing this to make myself look better? Or am I sharing this because as a leader, this is what we need to be doing for the greater good of the ministry, the greater good of the organization, and one of the analogies I use with clients all the time is, if there's two guys both going to serve at a homeless shelter, externally, they both look the same. They're both making the choice to go to the shelter. One of them knows that a news crew is going to be there, though. Mm. All of a sudden, externally, they look the same, but the heart is different. One guy's going to serve, the other guy's going, I might get some TV time, and that's going to look real good on my resume. You know what I mean? And I think those are differences that good leaders need to be able to have that check. Can you check do you have a heart check to go, what is my motivation here? So that leads me to my next question then. And because you're in this realm a lot. What are some of the mistakes you see people in leadership making on a pretty broad basis? Like, what are some of the things you would go, here's top 2, top 3, whatever it may be, things that you're seeing?
Yeah. Yeah. I think the biggest thing I see, probably more than anything, is people underplaying the role that their personality and their demeanor plays on the direction of the organization. I think they put a lot of thought and stock into their strategy, into having all the answers, into not being caught with their pants down when somebody asks them a question. But I don't think they put enough energy in realizing, and this is an old adage, but it's an old adage because it's true. Way more is caught than taught. It's much more about being real than it is about being right, especially in 2025. Maybe in 1955, 1958, 1968, that kind of stuff, people were more interested in you being the answer man or the answer woman. And that was the definition of a good leader. That's not the case today. Like, who you are as a person, your personal habits, your ability to follow through, to not overpromise and underdeliver. That's like 80%. People will overlook the fact that your strategy is just okay, or maybe you're still learning. But like, if people sense that your character is fake or that you're posturing, you're done. They'll write you off so fast. What
are some of the things? That's fascinating. I love that you went in that direction. When you look at personality as being one of those factors, what do you mean by that exactly?
We'll be right back.
Hey, this might sound a little bit strange, but pause for a second right now and ask yourself, what is God demanding of me that I'm not giving him? Yeah, that question is totally wrong. God isn't a demanding boss keeping a scorecard. He's a loving Father who gave us his Son to save us from the demands of the law. But here's the thing. Even though you know that's true, if you're anything like me, you still feel like God is always wanting more from you, right? Well, you're not alone. Come on over to the Signpost Inn podcast, where we explore what faith looks like when we start with God's grace instead of our own effort. Subscribe to the Signpost Inn podcast on your favorite platform today.
Yeah, what I mean is everybody has a different personality. And so your ability to own that and just say, hey, look, I'm the kind of person that just doesn't cry a lot. I'm the kind of person that's very, very emotional, and I'm the kind of person that really likes detail, or I'm the kind of person that likes to fly high and I love long-term vision. But whatever it is, there's different elements of personality. But your ability to know what it is first, and then to own that and say, this is the best that I can bring to this organization based on the gifts that God's given me. And by default, I'm limited in what else I can do. So I have to surround myself with other people who have other gifts and other skills. Also, I recognize that my personality has a huge effect on how we think as an organization. I'm just going to own that. Your ability to recognize that and own that creates this sense of comfort and consistency in the people that you're leading. Because then they're like, okay, well, at the very least, Dan knows that he's sometimes an insensitive jerk. Okay, at least he knows it, and at least he's owned it. So now we can all own it and we can laugh about it. And then I can be free to be myself because he knows who he is and so on and so forth. So, your ability to own that sense of personality, understand who you are and say, like, obviously I need to change and grow. We all do. Yeah. But these are the things that, from what I can sense, are kind of pretty permanent in who I am. And I'm going to do the best I can with what I've got.
Yeah. You mentioned that you're a sports fan, and I am as well. And one of the things as a dad that we've kind of indoctrinated here at our house, I love sports and I love basketball. I've been loving watching the playoffs. I'm sad the Cavs were knocked out. But one of my favorite things, especially in basketball, is when that hard foul happens and the guy just raises his hand and goes, yes, I did that. I own it. And I love it. One of the things that we do here that I've done, and especially modeling as a father, there are times where I make mistakes. I'll immediately raise my hand and go, that's me. That's on me. And I've got a 3 and a 7-year-old, and I've seen my 3-year-old walking around. She'll do something mean to her sister or my 7-year-old, and they raise their hand. That's me.
They actually physically raise their hand.
Yeah. We raise our hands, and I own that. That's on me. And totally stole that from, sports or whatever. But I think that's that's so important that we recognize, and I share with our team, I don't have all the answers. Like, I don't know everything. I will do my best to find the answer. But I think the other thing is just being authentic when I make mistakes and go, you know what, I can own that one, versus making it seem like that wasn't the case. Like I didn't make the mistake. I shift the blame or whatever. I can see you're definitely responding to that.
So, my goodness, you're speaking my language. First, I would love to, if we had more time, I'd love to dig into the raising of the hand when you call a foul. I mean, the fact that your family does that, that's so strong.
Yeah.
But in sports, you're trying to win the game, right? And so the fact that people would raise their hand like that and say, hey, I committed a foul, says that there's more to what we're doing than me looking good. There's more to what we're doing here than me staying in the game. There's an integrity to this. I acknowledge that there's a bigger plan here that I'm a part of, And so just for the sake of sportsmanship, I'm going to raise my hand. Man, that is great. And there's no rule that can tell you have to do that. That's just like the culture of whatever sport you're watching, which I love that. To that end, as a leader, I mean, gosh, like when everybody knows that you made a mistake and you refuse to raise your hand and say, I did, like it means that you're messing with reality. It means that you're trying to like gaslight people. It means that you have the type of character that refuses to call a pig a pig. For some reason, you just won't call a spade a spade. And when you can't do that because your ego is so big, that casts doubt on literally every other decision that you make.
Yeah.
Now they can't trust you to do what you say you'll do, or to just, follow through because your character is corrupted. And so now they have to verify literally everything else you say. Yeah. And now there's more energy and effort and work that's going into kind of checking everybody as opposed to just trusting everybody. Yeah. And that's a recipe for disaster.
Yeah. And I think one of the important things is any type of, whether you're in a leadership position or not, just being a Christian by nature, you're leading. It doesn't matter what your position is at work. But if you don't have a teachable heart, I think you've missed the boat on your faith journey. I think I've worked with pastors, God bless them, who have been very, very successful, and they get to a point sometimes and they're like, I've learned it all. Like I know everything. And it's like, oh man, like I've had these conversations with guys and I'm like, and women. And it's like, that's a very dangerous place to be in, because then you're never wrong and you have complete authority and so on and so forth. And it's a very dangerous thing. So it's not shocking that they get to me, a mental health therapist, because of their inability to see those blind spots,
Yeah, man, that gives me shivers, Matt. Here's the other side of it. I have sympathy for people like that, right? Because the more successful you are, the more people want to put you on a pedestal. Yep. And the more they assume you have all the answers. And if you're in an environment like that for 10, 15, 20, pretty soon you start to kind of believe that you've got your domain figured out. You're like, man, I haven't been surprised in 20 years, I'm just being honest. I think I kind of do know everything. Yeah. And that's just not true. I mean, that you're a healthy leader with a teachable heart when the more you learn, the more questions you have. Mm-hmm. And the more you learn, the more you're like, man, I don't know anything. Mm-hmm. Like that is genuine humility. The more you're able to be exposed to sort of the broadness of human frailty, or, the thing that you're working on, or the country you're in, or the community you're part of, the more you're exposed to that, the more questions you have. Man, that's when you've got a teachable heart. You're genuinely driven by faith and curiosity.
Yeah. I love the fact that when we look at Jesus and the disciples, there's those early stages where he sent them out 2 by 2, but they weren't all ready. And he knew that. But it's like, I'm going to allow you to go, know you're going to make mistakes. You're going to come back, continue to learn, send you out again. It's such a refreshing model, because it's like, I think a lot of times the people that I work with, they're almost in a prison of fear because of failure. Like I don't want to move forward because I'm so fearful that I might fail that it's easier to not move at all. But it's like, but we're seeing Jesus. I mean, for all intents and purposes, the bedrock of the church was built on the shoulders of these guys who, up till the Last Supper, were a bunch of bumbling idiots. They still didn't have it figured out. But Jesus knew. He just knew, and he's like, look, I am going to instill all of this in them. And I try to model that going even in my own life of every position I've gone into, even years ago when our president said, "Hey, you were in a band. Would you be interested in doing a podcast?" I'm like, I don't know how to do that. Like,
But you were in a band. I mean, come on now. It's
we use
very similar.
microphones. But the thing is like the thing is I was excited about it. And I was like, I'll learn, but I don't know what I'm doing. The same thing. The first the analogy you made with the pilots, the first day as a mental health therapist, the first time I sat with a client, I was sitting there going, I don't know what I'm doing. Like this could go real south. You know what I mean? But I think God gave us the ability and the skills to be in those things. But sometimes it's like, it's okay to not have all the answers and make mistakes and own those things. But one more question, Dan, and then we'll kind of, I want to be respectful of your time, but I want to talk just a little bit as we kind of wrap about legacy and what does that mean? What does it look like? We use that word a lot, but as a leader, what are we trying to achieve when it comes to legacy?
Yeah, there's different ways that people think about legacy. I mean, part of it is, financial legacy. That's probably the first thing. Everybody wants something physical to pass on to the next generation. They can point to something and say, "Hey, this is yours. This is what I've built, and I can give you something now." So there's a certain level of pride that comes with that. That's not really the legacy that God's talking about. When he talks about discipleship and that kind of stuff, or Paul talks about that kind of stuff. So the point is legacy is really about not what you leave for people, but what you leave in people, right? That's kind of an old principle. It's who people are when you're not around anymore, and they can point and say, "I am this person because of so and so, because of the example they left, because the way they thought, because the time they spent with me. I rubbed shoulder to shoulder with them, and it rubbed off on me." And they can point directly to you. Now, whether you get credit for that or not while you're alive, that's a whole different story. But your legacy really is dependent on how people behave when you're not around anymore.
Yeah.
So if you have that mindset, gosh, that changes everything, right? So now you're thinking about like, how do I understand people well enough so that what God's put in me rubs off in them? Like, so your whole orientation in your business, in your church, in your ministry, whatever, is all about sort of building people up in a very tangible, consistent, eternal way.
What was hitting me when you were sharing that, it's like one of the biggest desires that I have with God is that he knows me. Like I want him to know me. I look at my kids and it's not the time that I've provided this or we've gone on this vacation. It's the intentional time that I spend with them, undistracted, just being in relationship. And then my kids know that I know them. I feel that way in leadership is listening, understanding, seeing what is best for our team, knowing them, getting to know them. It's like all those principles, you can just, they're in all aspects of life. And so I think that's a great call out on legacy because there's a big difference between legacy culturally and legacy spiritually, and I think we're constantly fighting those two as Christians, as leaders, as people in ministry or people even in the secular workplace. You're constantly fighting against those things. What is my legacy as far as what does that mean culturally? Like how much money do I make and what does my name mean and how many people know me versus what God's legacy is. And, anytime you hear that situation where it's like that person made an eternal impact on my life, like that's it, right?
That's it. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, that's good. And I think what you'll find, when you look at it deeply is that, the things of this world, the things that people would consider cultural or use the phrase secular can be incredible tools to help push forward that eternal impact. And so, it isn't often a question of picking either or, it's which comes first, which comes second, which influences one versus another. But you're 100% right. Like you got to keep the main thing at all times, and that, I mean, that's a recipe for a fulfilled life when you realize, okay, I used everything I had. what's that book, Oswald Chambers. I push myself to my utmost for his highest. Like that is a great way to live your life.
That's good. Dan, anything else you'd like to share with our audience before we wrap?
Yeah, I think one thing I've realized more than anything, and this is maybe a call out to some of the work that you're doing, the healthiest leaders have people backstage. There's real responsibility front stage. There's things you have to do and have to say as a leader that you probably wouldn't rather do and wouldn't rather say if you were just kind of by yourself. But it comes with the responsibility of leading well, whether you're leading a big organization or a small organization, big church, small church, whatever. But the backstage, I mean, that is so important. And the healthiest leaders have a counselor, they have an organization, they have people they can turn to where they can just be them, nothing to hide, nothing to prove, nothing to lose. And the stronger that backstage is, the more consistent they can be on the front stage, the more authentic they can be on the front stage, because they're not trying to get, their identity from who people think they are on the front stage. They've developed that on the backstage with someone who can call out, their crap and say, you don't know everything. They need people like that. So kudos to you for doing great work. Leaders literally cannot lead well if you don't have a strong backstage. And that's what you're here for. So good for you.
That's really, really good. Dan, where if people are listening and they'd like to find you, follow, check you out, where are the best places for them to do that?
Yeah, so the easiest places on LinkedIn or Instagram, very active on those platforms. Facebook, you can find me there. You can go to danowolabi.com. There's more information about who I am, the book that I wrote. It's on Amazon. Really excited to see that become a #1 Amazon new release, which was fun. So pick that up if you want to know more about authenticity. The organization I lead is called Branches Worldwide. And so if you go to branchesworldwide.org, it's kind of a play off of John 15:5, I'm the vine, you are the branches. You can find more information about the work we do around the world.
I will put all of those in the show notes as well so that people can get quick access to that. Dan, I'm a huge fan. I'm so thankful that you've carved out some time to spend with us on the ExEm podcast, and really, really grateful for your insight and the conversation we had today.
It's been great. I really enjoyed it. Thanks.
Thanks, Dan, for sharing your heart and your deep desire to help those who lead and create a legacy that matters eternally. As I mentioned in the podcast, we all lead somewhere. It might just be in our homes with our family. Maybe it's at work. Maybe it's coaching our kids in sports. Maybe it's at church, or even leading ourselves. I hope this was helpful information in any of those areas that you lead in. Thank you for listening. Please share this episode with those who will benefit from it. For more information about Emerge, visit emerge.org. Well, until next time, or when our Savior comes, God bless.